Hello! Unit 3 for Photoshop is about selections. And what you'll be learning to do is make very effective selections, and then your assignments will be making a collage and the most notable and wonderful, swapping the heads. All right. Well, first we have to learn about how to make really good selections. This is part 1 of the Unit 3 video series. First, let's open from the share drive a house file. Do File, Open. Navigate to the S drive. Under Wolbert, your appropriate hour. Go into Photoshop. Go into Pictures and choose Unit 3 Selections. Within that will be a JPEG of a house. Say Open. And we are good to start. Now remember, you're doing what I'm doing, so you should have just opened this file. As I do something in Photoshop, you'll pause, and then you'll do something in Photoshop, the same thing. Okay, to start with, let's change our view. Let's say View, Fit on Screen. That's a much nicer house to look at. It's larger for us. And we are going to duplicate this beginning item by saying Image, Duplicate. That way we don't have to worry about accidentally saving over the original house picture. So it's going to say House Copy. You say OK. Now you have your house copy up and you have your house JPEG up. We are going to close the original JPEG and only deal with the house copy. Now again, just as a refresher, View, Fit on Screen, or Control 0. All right, now with the house picture, we're going to go first over the marquee tools. So let's go ahead and grab your rectangular marquee. Remember, if you press and hold, there's the rectangular, elliptical, and single row and column. Well, we're just going to stay with our regular old rectangular marquee, which you've learned already. And let's look at the options bar. First off, they have new selection, add, subtract, and intersect selections. The feathering. Now what that does is basically soften the edges of the selection so it won't be as crisp. I keep mine at 0 for now because I want it to be crisp. The style. The only way you can get width and height to show up is if you choose, let's see, fixed aspect ratio, or you choose a fixed size that you want your box, your marquee to be. We want it to be whatever shape or whatever size we decide it to be. So we're going to say normal. And let's go ahead and zoom in a wee bit to the garage. Now remember, I can zoom in, then I can get the hand, and I can move the picture to exactly within my screen. I'm going to go back to the marquee, and I'm just going to do a selection. Easy enough. Okay, so I've selected. You're saying this is nothing new. Well, it isn't. We know this. But let's go to the next part that says Add to Selection. Now that we have our new selection, let's add, and let's just go up and say, okay, we want it from the top of the gutter. So let's go ahead and just select another general area. Notice it increased the selection. Let's say, oh, we changed our minds. We don't want it to be that large. We can go to Subtract from Selection, and notice the little plus with the minus sign on the screen. We could select whatever it is we no longer decide to have selected, and it subtracts. Even on the left, I can go ahead and say, okay, I do want these to be equal, so I'm no longer going to have an extended selection over here. So let me try that again. There's 1. So you can do it in increments, 2, and now I'm fine. I'm back. Okay, so that's just a quick lesson in how to add to the selection and how to subtract to the selection. What does it mean by intersect? Okay, let's try that. Let's say that we just even were to cross over on a selection. Watch what happens. Only the 2 selection portions that are intersected will show up. Now, there's another way you can do this. If you hit your Shift key, notice it turns to a plus sign. There's a plus. There's your cross arrow with the plus. What do you think will happen? If I get a little crazy here, okay, I'll move that back up. And yes, I increased my selection. Okay, that was with Shift. What if I hold down my Alt key? Notice the crosshairs with the minus sign, so naturally you can guess it's the same as saying subtract from selection. Shift draw to add, Alt draw to subtract, or merely use your options up here. Let's all click back to new selection, and we'll continue on with an ellipse. So let's deselect. Again, remember to deselect it. Select, deselect, Control D, or some of you like to right click. No matter what you want, deselect. Okay, next, we're going to draw. Could everybody navigate over and choose the hose? Really zero in on that hose. You know, you can do it from going over to your navigator. You can move around within your navigator, but we need to get a really big, and then I'm going to move it around in my navigator again. This is just another way. My little hand goes in the window. Okay, so I have this hose here. Now what I want to do with the hose actually is I want to put it on an exact replica of that directly above where the existing hose is. So first off, let's choose the proper selection tool, elliptical marquee. Now watch as I go to a corner and I draw down. Sometimes it goes over, sometimes it doesn't seem like it's going to fit. Hold down your space bar, then move. Notice I'm still holding my mouse down. I never released it, and then I can continue to adjust it as needed as long as that space bar is in play. I'm going to release it, and now I have my first selection. Now, what happens if I were to do my move tool? Oh, by the way, you can do the same thing. You can make a new selection. You can do add to the selection if you need to. Watch, I can go ahead and add and make it a little wider here if I need to. Or I am going to undo that because mine was good. Or you could subtract from the selection by just saying, oh, I don't need that part. Again, I'm going to undo that in my history palette because my selection was good. Now, I need to move this slightly over, and then I need to copy it. I'm going to go to my move tool. So I go up to move, and I adjust it a little bit. Watch, I can just pull it away. The only problem is, I'm going to go back, is that I don't want it to cut out and make it black. I want it to duplicate it. So the way to do that, I hold down Alt, and I get two little arrows that show up. And now I can move my hose above. And there I go. I have two hoses. I now can deselect, and I have two sections of the hose. Now, of course, I'd have to do some touch-up and get rid of part of this spigot and everything else. But for now, just so that you understand the basics, how to select, to use your space bar to adjust the size of the elliptical object, to use Shift, and to use Alt accordingly when you would like to. Let's move on now. Okay, there is one more. Let's go all the way over and just kind of do view, fit on screen, go back to your marquee tool and say single row. Just anywhere on here, just click at the top and choose a row. What basically single row is, it's a 1 pixel wide area in the image. Watch. Now let's copy this. Let's just say we're going to copy this. We do edit, copy, right click copy, or control C. Now go down to the wee bottom so you can see what happens. Click down here, and now let's just say edit paste. You can do again control V, edit paste, whatever you want to do. And notice that a portion of that sky line was copied down here to the bottom. So that's one thing you can do with the tiny little pixel rows. Okay, let's undo this. Undo marquee. I'm going to click on my regular lasso tool. All right, with the lasso tool, it's more for irregular selections. So let's suppose with the lasso, we would like to, let's just show the mailbox. So let's zoom in. Take our little hand, go to that mailbox here. Okay, and let's suppose I wanted to go around the mailbox. I am freehanding this, and this is an irregular selection, but notice it's not as good a selection as I could do. But there are times when you definitely want a free hand, like if you just want to choose, okay, well, feeling pretty steady. I'm just going to choose this section here, for example. But no, there's uses of it, but what I would like you to learn more is what will happen when you hold down Alt. All of a sudden, you will see it toggle from a regular lasso to a polygonal lasso, which is used to do directed angles. The magnetic lasso is used when it actually has little fastening points that adhere. So let's stay on the regular lasso. Let's make sure it's a new selection, 0 feathering. Oh, anti-aliasing is on because it smooths the edges of your selection. It kind of blurs or smooths them. Okay, let's continue on. So we have this time some straight edges. So let's hold down Alt and notice we click. And all of a sudden I still have my regular lasso on, but now I can do some really straight. Now I'm going to release the Alt key but keep my mouse button down. And look, it turns into the regular old lasso. Hold down Alt again. I can release my mouse, click, and click. And it did a little better job for me because I was able to hold down Alt and do straight lines when I click. And I can release my mouse. But anytime I'm freehanding, I have to hold down my left mouse button the entire time. Okay, so we know the polygonal lasso does more straight lines, angles. We know that the regular lasso does just irregular shapes. Now let's go to the magnetic lasso. Deselect. Notice the options for the magnetic lasso are much more extensive. Your feathering is 0, your smoothing is checked. You can do edge contrast. What that does is it's the path in which you would like your magnetic lasso to choose the fastening points from. And the frequency. Mine is set as 100 right now because I like it's the higher the frequency, the more fastening points it puts in. The lower the frequency, the fewer fastening points it comes in. It's actually the opposite with the edge control. The lower I go with the edge contrast, actually, the less the edge contrast, or the higher I go, the more the edge contrast. Okay? So they work in reverse with each other. Here we go. Now, magnetic lasso is very cool. If you want to set your frequency to about 100, well, actually, no, let's start on 25 just so you can see the difference. Everybody set your frequency to 25. Now, all I want you to do, I don't want you to click. I just want you to start at the left of the mailbox. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. And I'm just going to start and follow along. And notice it hasn't done any fastening points. There's the first one. There's the second one. See, you can click to add them, but you may not always want to have to click to add them. You may want the fastening points just to come up themselves. Okay, deselect that. I'm doing Control D. Now let's adjust the frequency to, let's say, 100. Now do the same selection around the middle mailbox. And notice the fastening points because we increased the frequency of the points. So now I can just pretty much go around. I go to the end and it selects. What happens if I accidentally go off path and it starts making points? If you hit backspace, 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 okay, go back to, backspace. There we go. Now I'm back on path. Also, I can click. If I feel it's out of whack, I can go back, back. You can also hit your delete key, by the way, and then get back on path of where I think it should be. So I can direct the magnetic lasso. Warning though, if you go a little crazy and you suddenly go off the screen, oh boy, you're a little lost. I'm way up in the sky. You might as well double click and deselect and try again. Because look, I'm way up in the sky instead of way down by the mailboxes. Okay, there we go with the magnetic lasso. We are moving on. Next, we're going to just talk about the magic wand and in selecting by a color range. After we do that, we'll talk about an inverse and we'll be done with part 1. A lot of you already are very, very familiar with the magic wand. Let's try it with some of these flowers. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, it's so blurry. So let's suppose that with the magic wand I wanted to select, for example, one of the flowers here. I go to my magic wand, it chooses by color, but notice my tolerance. Again, I have the same old new, add, delete, and intersect. My tolerance is at 22. I can raise that up a little bit, maybe to 32. Then I'm going to try my selection again. I'm going to deselect and click again. Notice it gets an even wider area, but not wide enough yet because there's different shades within the flowers. The anti-aliasing, it's smoothing. It's contiguous, where it's just going to only sample items right next to it. I'll show you an example if you check that off in a minute. Use all layers. Well, I only have one layer, but if I wanted all layers to come through with this color, then I would check that, but that's not the case right now. Okay, let's increase the tolerance to 50 and see what happens. Deselect. See, now it's a bigger area. If I want to keep selecting, I can hold down Shift, and I get a little magic wand with a plus sign, and expand my region. So now I have my flower selected. All right, that's one way you can do it. And if you want to subtract from the selection, remember it well. If you hold down Alt, you can subtract. So Shift says no more pixels, fine. So I'll select something. Shift will add, Alt will subtract. Okay, deselect. All right, another way that we can do something is, let's suppose that I want to have all the white parts, or close to the white parts, selected in the picture. Well, if I just click over here, just that one section is selected because contiguous is clicked on. Let's deselect. Now click off contiguous. Now go and click on the white framework and look what happens. Anything that it considers white, it just selected in the picture or close to that color. That's the difference between contiguous and discontiguous. So we are going to check contiguous back on because normally we keep it on and deselect. Next, let's talk about what if we wanted to select all the green in the, like the trees, the grass, all the green in the picture, and we want to do it by just selecting what's called a color range. Well, what we do is, I'm just going to go back to the regular marquee for a minute, and let's suppose we say select color range. Select color range. Now, within the select color range, what we're going to do is we have our little eyedropper here. We're going to let the eyedropper choose, let's say, this piece of grass over here, so that we can get the color on it. Now, so we clicked on the desired color, and then we have our sampled colors already, but we decided to just use the green here. And now we can adjust the fuzziness, and the fuzziness level, it's increases. If you increase the value, it'll cause Photoshop to select similar colors to the color you selected, but you don't want to go too crazy. Actually, probably more like what I had it set at, an 80 is probably good. Now let's see what happens if we say OK. There you go. It selected just about all the green, even some of the bushes and everything that are in the picture. Of course, you'd have to go through, and you'd have to hold down Alt with the minus sign, and you'd have to choose some of these areas you didn't want selected, but that was a little tree branch, but maybe I don't want this section selected, so you'd have to go through and deselect some of this. But in the long run, that can be a pretty powerful way to select if you have multiple items to choose. Control D it, deselect, on to the very last thing you need to learn, which is the inverse tool. All right, now with the inverse tool, what you can basically do, let's suppose that we were to get our magic wand out again. My tolerance I'll put to 32. I'm going to click on the driveway, and notice it did a pretty good job of clicking on the driveway. But what if I wanted to just keep that section of the driveway? I wanted that, but I don't want the driveway selected. I want everything else in the picture other than the driveway selected. What I would do is I would select the inverse, or say Shift Control I. Now look, the dotted marching ants are around not just the driveway, but the exterior. Now, if you hit delete just so you can see what's there, it's just going to be the portion of the driveway. So that's really all that's selected. So we selected the inverse. Let's go ahead and Control Z that, which is the same as edit undo. And congratulations, you finished the very first part of the video series for Unit 3.